Welcome to WION. You're watching Inside South Asia with me, Neha Khanna. It's the show that takes an in-depth look at the week's biggest news stories from South Asia and how they impact your life. Our big focus on the show today, India's much talked about budget and the global economic outlook, with many international agencies dubbing India as a bright spot. Here's a quick look at what's coming up. India's much anticipated budget was presented in Parliament by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Wednesday. Labelled as the blueprint of India at 100, the budget includes the highest ever capital expenditure outlay in the infrastructure and agricultural sectors. There is some relief for the middle class, as now there will be no income tax for those earning up to 7 lakh rupees a year. India has boosted its defence budget by 13%. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says this budget will lay India's foundation of a strong economy and infuse new energy into the country's growth trajectory. Here's all you need to know.
The world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star. Our current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. It is notable that this is the highest among all the major economies. This is in spite of the massive slowdown globally caused by COVID-19 and the war. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track, and despite a time of challenges, heading towards a bright future. Inclusive development.
Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's fifth budget speech, and with the country standing tall in the backdrop of global economic gloom, the world glare just cannot be missed. Perhaps her biggest challenge, a tightrope balance between fiscal prudence, populist necessities, and also India's global responsibilities. This ahead of general elections in India next year, and also India's presidency of the G20. The priorities she laid out at the start pretty much spelled that out. The big takeaways: the fiscal deficit for 2024 has been put at 5.9%, with assurances of targets being met. Projected capital expenditure outlay has been raised a whopping 33% to 10 trillion rupees. That's over $122 billion. The capital expenditure outlay is higher than the 7.5 trillion budgeted in the previous year and the highest on record. 790 billion rupees have been allocated for affordable housing, again a jump compared to last year. There's a big focus on India's responsibilities and targets to convert to renewable energy. 350 billion rupees have been set aside for green transition. There's a revamped 2 trillion rupee credit guarantee for micro, small and medium enterprises. And the agriculture credit target is up to 20 trillion rupees. That's $244 billion.
The Indian economy is therefore...
Most closely watched perhaps has been the personal tax road ahead, and the finance minister pushed the new tax regime as easing tax pressure on the middle class. Tax slabs here have been tweaked, alongside assurances that there's no pressure to shift from the old scheme. What is stressed, however, is that the new tax regime will now be the default. Economic experts gave the budget an early thumbs up. The big thrust to urbanization and travel and tourism, and a big push to go digital through added research in artificial intelligence and digital skilling have been welcomed as forward-looking.
The most important thing is that this is going to be a very major catalyst for infrastructure growth, which is very, very important, because that has huge multiplier impact. So if you're putting close to about 10 lakh crores and 3 years running, you are increasing it. That's a very, very major driver.
Industry has welcomed the budget as growth-oriented, addressing tax compliance and holding big, broader positives ahead. Concerns raised on fiscal prudence and populism have been set aside, with India Inc. terming measures taken as pragmatic and practical.
It is not a populist budget as some feared. It is a budget which looks at both the short term, the medium term and the long term. And very important is the primacy of growth is very much there. And when growth comes, most of the indices look good. And one of the best ways of improving, whether it is livelihood or whether it is putting more money in the hands of people, is through growth.
A big say on the ultimate verdict lies here at the stock markets. The bosses cheered the budget.
Lalu kepemimpinan saya serahkan kepada India.
Much has been said of India's presidency of the G20 this year and the need for India to live up to responsibilities conferred on it by member and non-member nations. In that sense, the union budget stands out as a litmus test of sorts. There can be no downplaying the domestic constituency, but this year, possibly more than ever before, India's test is before the world too.
Another horrific terror attack in Pakistan. This time inside a packed mosque in Peshawar that has left over 100 people dead, most of them police officers. But the country's troubles are hardly confined to terrorism. Its economy is on the edge of a precipice. An acute food shortage has led to food riots. The Pakistani rupee is in free fall. The forex reserves are fast depleting. There's hardly any money left for imports. An unprecedented energy crisis has repeatedly plunged the country into darkness. Inflation has soared to levels not seen before. Petrol and diesel are unaffordable for most. Essentially, Pakistan is living a nightmare. And this dangerous cocktail of Islamist terror, political instability and an economic meltdown now seem to threaten the very existence of Pakistan. Yet another terror attack in Pakistan and dozens of lives lost. This time, a suicide bomber blew himself up inside a packed mosque in the northwestern city of Peshawar. The latest attack targeting the police in a heavily fortified security compound has left at least 80 people dead and over 150 others injured. Many of them are in a critical condition. Hundreds of people had gathered for the afternoon prayers when the attack took place. The impact of the blast was so powerful, it brought down the upper story of the mosque, trapping dozens of worshippers under the rubble. Reports suggest close to 400 people, mostly police officers, were present inside the compound when the bomb went off. What followed were heart-rending scenes of panic and chaos, amid screams and bodies strewn all over. Rescuers could be seen cutting through the collapsed rooftop to get to the victims caught in the wreckage. The suicide bomber managed to pass through several barricades manned by security forces and gained entry into the Red Zone compound that houses the headquarters of the Provincial Police Force and a counter-terrorism department in the volatile city of Peshawar. At first, some members of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or the TTP claimed responsibility for the attack. But later, the terror organization that has been responsible for most of the terror attacks in Pakistan in recent times distanced itself from the Peshawar suicide bombing. Peshawar, which straddles the edge of Pakistan's tribal districts bordering Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, is frequently targeted by Islamist militant groups, including the Islamic State and the Pakistani Taliban. From recruiting members to arms transfers, this is where many of the terror operations are centered. This comes as the latest in a string of terror attacks that have left Pakistan battered. 2022 saw over 1,000 people being killed in hundreds of attacks, most of them carried out by the TTP. An enormous challenge, undoubtedly, but Pakistan's troubles are by no means confined to terrorism alone. The South Asian country is in the throes of its worst economic crisis in its entire 75-year history. Walloped by last year's catastrophic floods, Pakistan's economy is tottering on the brink of collapse. Pakistan is the world's 8th largest producer of wheat, but today it is struggling to feed its own people. A massive food shortage has led to food riots and stampedes at ration shops. Alarmingly, some 6 million people are experiencing acute food insecurity. This figure could very likely rise to 8.5 million in the days ahead. Amid an unprecedented energy crisis, major cities have faced repeated blackouts. Fuel prices have soared to levels not seen before. Today, petrol in Pakistan costs a staggering 262 rupees a litre and diesel 249 rupees. The Pakistani rupee has been in free fall, crashing to a record low of 265 against the US dollar. Inflation has skyrocketed past 35%. The forex reserves are at an all-time low. The country is left with just about $4 billion in forex, barely enough to sustain imports for 2 to 3 weeks. Pakistan's foreign debt is close to $99 billion, having surged by 1,500% in over 2 decades. It desperately needs a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, but the IMF is wary of lending more money to the country. To bring the IMF around, Islamabad has to meet a rash of very tough conditions. That means another steep hike in fuel and electricity prices is almost inevitable. And then there are fears that the government is set to unleash an avalanche of fresh taxes, which could break the back of the average Pakistani. Needless to say, the economic meltdown has significantly deepened the political instability that has plagued Pakistan for years, in fact decades. It's a country that has been ruled by the army for nearly half of its existence, thanks to military coups and unstable civilian governments. Opposition leader Imran Khan, who has already been demanding fresh elections in Pakistan, has trained his guns on the Shehbaz Sharif government, accusing it of completely messing up the economy and bringing Pakistan to its knees. Could the current crisis threaten the survival of the Pakistan government, which is already hanging by a thread? As Pakistan grapples with a maze of seemingly insurmountable obstacles on a myriad fronts, its best and perhaps only hope is to get that elusive IMF bailout package. But will it materialize? As the country faces that billion-dollar question, one thing is clear: Pakistan is currently living a veritable nightmare. The dangerous cauldron of growing Islamist terror, ever-increasing political instability, and untold economic adversity that's worsening by the day seem to threaten the very existence of Pakistan today. Hardly a day goes by when Afghanistan does not make headlines for a humanitarian crisis. Women's rights are being crushed every day. The Taliban's medieval laws are taking the country back to the Stone Age. Young girls and women are being deprived of an education and the right to work. Today we'll tell you about how, since the Taliban captured power in 2021, millions of Afghan nationals have been pushed into extreme poverty and hunger. According to the World Health Organization, the malnutrition rates in Afghanistan are at record highs. Scores of families have no money to feed their children. And while the Taliban have shown how little they care, what about the international community, especially the Western powers that abandoned the Afghan people overnight, leaving them at the mercy of the Taliban?
This is the Indira Gandhi Children's Hospital in Kabul. The beds are cramped with malnourished children. In some cases, 3 or 4 children are forced to share a single bed. Zarmina, a mother of 5, brought her son to this hospital 10 days ago as he began losing weight. She says her husband is unable to earn enough to feed the children. There are days when the family doesn't have a morsel to eat.
My son got sick because every day, even when his father goes out to work, he cannot earn enough to feed him. If he manages to buy some bread, we will have something to eat. Otherwise, there has been many times that we have spent the whole day without eating anything.
According to the World Food Programme, malnutrition rates in Afghanistan have reached alarming levels, with half the country enduring severe hunger throughout the year.
Currently, 2/3 of the population, 28 million people, are in need of humanitarian assistance for survival. Of these, nearly 20 million people are expected to be severely food insecure this year. Of those, 6 million literally do not know where their next meal will come from.
The Taliban takeover in August 2021 drove millions into poverty and hunger after foreign aid stopped almost overnight. Soon after Kabul fell to the Taliban, WION visited the Afghanistan capital. We went to the Indira Gandhi Hospital, one of the best equipped children's hospitals in the country. And this is how bad things were. The 150-bed hospital had to treat almost 450 patients. Many children were left gasping for air.
The mortality rate in this ward remains very high. As you can see, there are 2 children being made and adjusted on a single bed. Doctors here say that there is a medicine shortage. They say that they're not able to save the patients, to save these young newborns for inadequate supplies. The humanitarian crisis is prevalent.
A year later, things have got much worse. Sanctions on the Taliban regime, a halt on bank transfers and frozen currency reserves restricted access to global institutions and external assistance that supported the country's aid-dependent economy. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Taliban's recent ban on women working for NGOs has dealt a body blow to aid programs. Dozens of NGOs have suspended operations in Afghanistan. Hundreds of mobile health clinics have disappeared, impacting over 80,000 children and pregnant and lactating women. A school meal program being put on hold has hit over 600,000 students. Afghanistan's ongoing humanitarian crisis has become significantly worse in the winter season. Freezing weather, heavy snowfall and the mercury plummeting to minus 30 degrees Celsius in recent weeks has claimed at least 170 lives.
We don't have wood to keep us warm. We don't have anything. All I have is a wheelbarrow, and I can make about 10 to 20 US cents every day to feed myself, with just some cold water and bread.
Afghanistan has been facing a severe humanitarian crisis due to the 2 decades of war waged by the United States and the economic sanctions imposed after the withdrawal of NATO troops. While it is clear that the Taliban only care about consolidating their power, the question is for how long will the international community remain a mute spectator to the misery of the Afghan people? Do the Western powers that abandoned the Afghan people with their hasty withdrawal in 2021 have no responsibility towards these people?
Let's now shift our focus to the tiny Himalayan nation of Nepal. A country synonymous with political revolving doors and unending games of thrones. After all, Nepal has had 13 prime ministers in the last 16 years. Little wonder then that less than a month into the term of the new coalition government led by Prime Minister Prachanda, the cracks in the ragtag ruling alliance are already showing. Take a look at this report.
Politics and power make for strange bedfellows, they say. Nepal is used to it. It's all used to the tie-ups falling apart. Less than a month into the Dahal Oli-led 7-party alliance that formed a new government, another political crisis cusp lurks. Elected representatives are unhappy and cracks are showing. Even in the so-called honeymoon period, frictions are out in the open.
Prachanda ji, और ओली जी.
Prime Minister Prachanda and CPN UML Chair KP Sharma Oli hold separate meetings and make unilateral decisions on behalf of the coalition. We have been consistently demanding that all 7 alliance member parties should be taken into confidence while deciding on ministerial allocations and governance. Therefore, we have not joined the cabinet despite being an alliance member.
The latest tussle is between Prime Minister Dahal and UML chief Oli over the choice of president. In a turnaround, Oli wants his man for the job. Dahal is worried that Oli, who will take over as Prime Minister in 2.5 years as part of a rotational deal, would also then control the president. That's besides differences over the Home Minister with another ally RSP. Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister Rabi Lamichhane had to quit after Nepal's top court scrapped his membership of the House for not producing a valid nationality certificate. RSP Chief Lamichhane has now managed to get his citizenship certificate back. Prachanda himself has decided to hold on to 3 key portfolios, including Home. An ally, Janamat Party, has got nothing. There's every indication of issues blowing up and any ideas of stability being pushed to the brink.
We are part of the 7-party coalition government and we cannot leave. Therefore, we want some ministries to sustain the government. We accepted the Ministry of Water Supply at the PM's request, but this is not comfortable and our party will see what can be done. We will discuss and analyze the possibilities of working for the country outside the government. If that works, then our party will accordingly take steps.
The Dahal-Oli tie-up in December came after a prolonged stalemate, when Dahal walked out of the pre-poll alliance led by Nepali Congress and joined hands with the CPN-UML. Friends turned foes are friends again. Prime Minister Prachanda's CPN Marxist Communist Party has 32 seats in the 275-member House. He has allied with the CPN-UML of KP Sharma Oli under a rotational leadership agreement. Oli has 79 seats. They have the support of 5 smaller parties comprising 43 members. Nepal Congress of Sher Bahadur Deoba with 89 seats remains the biggest party in the House. However, it has not taken the position of the opposition and supported Dahal in the trust vote. Now the question is it looking at a future coup? The bigger picture remains one of a government on thin ice, with doubts being raised on Prachanda honouring the leadership rotation agreement with KP Sharma Oli after 2.5 years. We are in for an extended phase of political instability and a new political churning. Nepal has had 13 prime ministers in the last 16 years. The average tenure of a government is a little more than a year. Stability in Nepal remains a casualty.
It's barely a month-old government which is being led by Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal, and it's already on a shaky ground. Problems and disagreements have surfaced in the 7-party coalition government. Small fringe parties like Janmat Party and Janta Samajwadi Party are questioning the leadership of Pushpa Kamal Dahal and his ministerial allocation process to what they call unfair and unbalanced. Experts have called this government a shaky and a fractured government. They question if this government will be able to provide the stability that the Himalayan nation requires. Saloni Murarka for WION World is One in Kathmandu, Nepal.
Well, that's not the only reason why Nepal is making headlines, at least in India. Last week, we told you that Nepal was all set to transport some of its ancient rocks, unique gems and precious stones for the construction of the majestic Ram temple in the Indian town of Ayodhya. That process has now begun, complete with religious rituals, colorful celebrations and song and dance. Take a look. clear testament to the age-old cultural bond between India and Nepal, which is only likely to get stronger with this goodwill gesture. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Inside South Asia. Hope you enjoyed the show. Do join us again next week as we return with all the action from the region. Till then, stay safe and well. I'm Neha Khanna signing off. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to WION. World is One.